Good afternoon, everyone. I will share my screen and then we can start with today's session. So last session we started about schedulers. I would say threads, multi-threading. Multi-threading we started in the last session. So we discussed about what is task and what is single tasking, and we discussed about what is multitasking, and we discussed about types of threads. There are two types of threads. One is predefined thread and second one is user defined thread. User defined thread. Next we discussed about types of threads: predefined thread, user defined thread. Predefined thread and user defined thread. User defined thread you can create in two ways. Again, user defined thread you can create in two ways that we discussed in the last session. User defined thread again you can create in two ways. What are the two ways? One is by extending thread class, and the second one is by implementing a runnable interface. A runnable interface. And in the last session what I gave the assignments which actually write a Java program. In the main method I gave one assignment. I given one assignment which is actually predefined thread. So write a Java program to print the main thread, the details of main thread, meaning thread name, thread priority, and the details about main thread. That is the one program. And second program, write a Java program, write a thread. You can create a user defined thread by using thread class. That is the one assignment I given. And the third one is by implements runnable interface, write a Java program, write to create a thread by using runnable interface. These are the three things I given the assignment in the last session. Okay. Now, okay, fine, very good. These are the topics we learned in the last session. Okay, fine, very good. Today, we'll discuss about what is thread scheduler. What is thread scheduler, and what is thread scheduler? So I hope these all the topics are clear. Meaning you got the clarity, like what does it mean by task, single tasking, multitasking, types of threads, what does it mean by predefined thread, and what does it mean by user defined thread. And user defined thread, again you can create user defined thread in two ways. One is by extending the thread class, and second one is by implementing the runnable interface. So this is clear now. Okay, fine. Now we'll go ahead with thread scheduler. What is thread scheduler? So I will give the few of the points. Thread scheduler. What is thread scheduler? Thread scheduler. What is thread scheduler? I can say thread scheduler is a program in the JVM which is responsible to schedule the threads. So thread scheduler is a program in the JVM. Thread scheduler is a program in the JVM, and which is responsible which is responsible to schedule the thread's execution, to schedule the thread's execution, to schedule the thread's execution, to schedule the thread execution and the resources and a resource allocation which are required for the thread execution, and a resource execution which are required, resource execution which are required for thread execution, thread execution. What is thread scheduler? Thread scheduler is a program in JVM which is responsible to schedule the thread execution and the resource execution, and which are required for the thread execution, which are required for the thread execution. Resource allocation, resource allocation. Okay, fine. Now, so when the thread scheduler came into the picture, normally you will write the program. How we can write the program? Thread. How you can create the thread? Normally, you can take normal class, and you can create in two ways. And in the last session, we discussed about we can create a thread in two ways. By using extend class is the one way, and second one is by implementing the runnable interface is the second way. There are two ways we discussed in the last session, and we discussed one more point about which actually so there are two ways. So from that two ways, which one is the recommended approach? Which one is the recommended approach? So that also we discussed in the last session. So by implementing runnable interface is the recommended approach, because it supports the inheritance concept. In future, if you want to extend any out of any other classes also, you can inherit the properties by using runnable interface. That is the advantage with the runnable interface. Okay, fine. Now I am mentioning as the runnable interface. Normally you will create here, and runnable interface have one method, that is the run method. Public void run method, and here you can create a main method, public static void main method, and here you can mention aux. Okay, fine. Now I want to call this method run method. Like here I would like to mention system dot out dot, I can mention println. Here I'm messaging run method executing some dummy message I'm writing. Okay, fine. Now main method, and inside the main method I want to call this run method. Here the point is, so how you can create the object for current class. So demo and object demo, I can say new demo, and okay, object code created for current class. Now you can create the thread. How you can create the thread? Thread thread, and t equal to new thread. So thread got created, and for that we should pass the this class object to that demo. Okay, thread is created. So which line? Thread is created successfully. Thread created successfully. But here the thread by default it won't execute. Thread by default it won't execute. Okay, it won't execute by default. You need to call to the thread, then only it will execute. How you can call? By using start method. Start method, then only when you call the thread, then only your thread will execute. If not, your thread will not execute. Your thread will not executing. So here what we are doing, we are calling the thread, we are calling the thread. So then only your thread will execute. Okay, then only your thread will execute. Okay, fine. Now the point here it is, when you call this start thread, meaning T dot start method meaning you are calling the thread. When you call the thread, when you use the T dot start method, then thread scheduler will come to the picture. Are you guys clear with my point? When you call, when we call the start method, then scheduler will start its operation. That is the point you should remember. When we call the start method, when we call the start method, when we call the start method, then thread scheduler will execute. Thread scheduler will start its operation. Thread scheduler will start its operation. Will starts its operation. Will starts its operation. Okay. So what are the operations it can perform? So the operations are, it will do allocating the resources, that is the one operation, and the second operation is thread schedule. Thread schedule, that is the one operation, and third one is I can say thread execution by calling the run method. Thread execution by calling the run method. Thread execution by calling the run method. Calling the run method. These are the operations. Who will perform these three operations? These operations thread scheduler will perform. Where the thread scheduler is available? Thread scheduler is the program which is available by default in JVM. When you call the start method, immediately when you call the T dot start method, immediately thread scheduler will come into the picture and it will start its operations. What operations it can perform? Allocating the resources, thread schedule, it schedule the thread, and thread executing by calling run method. Thread execution by calling run method. These operations can be performed by thread scheduler. Can be performed by thread scheduler. Are you guys clear with my point? Okay, fine. Now this is clear. Like in this program, what I did the same, uh, guys. So I am everyday assignments is the mandatory. Why I'm saying everyday assignments is the mandatory? Because so if you practice with the previous session, last day assignments, then only you guys will understand today's session. So these all the sessions we discussed in the last session. So okay, now okay, public demo implements runnable. Same program I wrote like whatever we discussed in the last session. The same program written here. You can see here thread t equal to new thread demo, and I am calling here. Here we have the run method and we have the run method. So when you call the start method, internally it will call the internally it will call the run method. Internally it will call the run method. Internally it will call the run method. I hope this is clear, everyone. Internally it will call the run method. The same program I will show you here. Thread scheduler. I will take. I will go to the IDE and then I will show you a demo test. And now I can take implements runnable interface. Implements runnable interface. Okay, fine. Now runnable interface is having only one method, that is the run method. Now here actually here I would like to take some sysout statement, and here I would like to mention some run method started. Run method run method started. Okay, run method started. Run method started. Okay, now I will take main method, and inside the main method I am creating object for current class, a demo test dt equal to new demo test object got created. And now you guys, can you please observe what I'm doing? Now if I run this program, which is displaying anything? No, nothing. Nothing it is displaying. It is not displaying anything because of, so the thread by default it won't execute. You have to create the thread. I will create the thread. uh, I can say I'm creating the thread, new thread. Okay, thread is created, and for that thread I am passing as an input to that class dt. Okay, fine, now good. Now if I run this one, now you can see it is printing anything. No, nothing is printing because of the thread by default it won't execute. You have to call to the thread, then only the thread method will then only the thread will execute. Start method. Okay, and then I'm saying saving the file. Now you can see the magic of this. See, run method is started. Run method is started. So the thread by default it won't execute. Thread by default it won't execute. You have to call to the thread. The thread by default it won't execute. The thread by default it won't execute. So when you call, here the thing is, when you call the start method, then thread scheduler will come into the picture. And who is executing this one? Thread scheduler. When you call the start method, then thread scheduler will execute the thread, and it is it will come into the picture, and it starts its operation. Its operation. Its operation. Its operation. So that is the thread scheduler. So thread scheduler, the purpose of thread scheduler is, so when you call the thread start method, then thread scheduler will start its operation. What kind of operations it can do? Allocating the resources, thread scheduler, thread execution by calling the run method. Run method. Run method. I hope this is clear for everyone. Next concept here, what is thread life cycle? 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 So the thread life cycle, in thread life cycle, in thread life cycle contains several phases. Contains several phases. Like first one we have the new and runnable, and the third one we have running, and fourth one we have blocked, blocked, or you can say waiting, or you can say waiting, and next we have terminated. So however human have the life cycle. Human can have the life cycle like human can born after human will born, and then human can survive. After its service, human will die, right? So this is the human life cycle. So similarly, thread is also having the life cycle. This, so we are only creating the thread. After the creating the thread, there are the stages like runnable, running, and blocked or waiting state and terminated state. So how the human have the life cycle? Similarly, thread also having the life cycle. The life cycle of the thread is these things: new, runnable, running, and blocked or waiting. We can say terminated. We can say terminated. We can say terminated. So this life cycle complete. I would say uh, this is the life cycle of the thread. Okay. However, human have the life cycle. So similarly, thread is also have the life cycle. Okay, fine, very good. Next, we can go ahead with one by one. So what does it mean by no? What it will do? What does it mean by runnable? What it will do? And what does it mean by running? What it will do? And what does it mean by blocking? So normally, if you can a diagram, so there we have the diagram as well. The diagram look for the thread life cycle. Thread life cycle in Java. You can there are multiple. So see here, new runnable active block. Now I am going to that location. I'll show you. Yeah, you can see this simple diagram. Yeah. So new runnable running block are waiting or terminate or dead. So here thread is created. The thread which is when you call the start method, then the a thread comes to new state to runnable state. New state to runnable state. Okay, next. So when you call the start method, then uh, here we have the thread scheduler, right? So when you call the start method, thread created start method, when you call the start method, and it will come to here runnable, and in the runnable internally we have the thread scheduler, right? The scheduler will also come into the picture, and one thread scheduler will starts its operation, and when it starts its operation, then this it will move to runnable state to running state, runnable state to running state. Okay, so thread scheduler pick up the thread and then it will execute the thread. So when it will execute the thread, then it will go to the running state. Then it will go to the running state. For example, if you write any like waiting state, or if the thread want to wait for the another thread, then at the time the thread will be in the waiting position. Waiting position. Okay, and finally the thread will be terminated. I will show you the practical, and then I will give the definition for each one. So new meaning, a thread begins a thread begins its life cycle in the new state, in the new state in the new state. Okay, so thread remains in the new state. Thread remains in the new state until you call the start method, until until we call until we call the start method. So the thread by default, it won't execute by default. Okay, a thread begins its life cycle in the new state. Thread remains in new state until remains new state until we call the start method. Until we call the start method. Okay, fine, very good. Next, we can go ahead with a runnable. We can go with a runnable. In the runnable, so okay, now you can assume. Okay, when I'm saying, you can assume. Okay, thread is created, but the thread won't execute until we call the start method. Now we need to call the start method. So the point is, after calling the start method, after calling the start method, after calling the start method, next thread will comes to thread comes from thread comes from new state to runnable state. New state to runnable state. Thread comes to new state to runnable state. Okay, next running. running. So running meaning